Sometimes you're born in the wrong house and don't realize it until you learn to count your own money. I found out the day the scholarship arrived by email. Its language cold and clean as a scalpel. The afternoon turned the color of steel, and the sound of the kettle in the kitchen felt like a truce breaking. I caught my reflection on the screen and felt something close to a laugh, but without teeth. It wasn't joy. It was seeing at last the sharp edge of the map. My name is Eliana. I was born in a half-crumbled red brick house 2 streets from an industrial estate in Small Heath, East Birmingham. My mother smelled of cheap detergent and hairspray. My father of tobacco hidden in the shed. My sister, Sydney, of fake fruit and impunity. The whole neighborhood learned her name before mine. Sydney could break things, blackmail, cry with laboratory precision. I was the easy child, the one who learned to move like water through cracks, not bothering, not asking. Silence was mine. Echo was hers. My memory is small and loyal like a dog. I keep useless things. My mother's shopping list with a line under cake for Sid. The ballet schedule with a red cross on Tuesdays. An emergency phone number that only rang when I wasn't the emergency. And that time with camp, Sydney lost the registration slip, said it was me, and I took the blame. No canal rides, no bike, just my father's stare cutting through me like the cold wind that runs through Digbeth in November. "Don't lie, Eliana," he said. I wanted to ask why he demanded something he'd never taught at home. I didn't. I learned not to. I grew up reading at the kitchen table with broken headphones. The house fell apart in precise places. A loose tile by the fridge, a bathroom door swollen at the bottom like a sick foot, a sofa with a wound showing the bone beneath. I studied the way you file down bars. I earned a full university scholarship, tuition, housing, books, everything. I got it knowing no one had my back, that the family's mythical college fund, they sometimes mentioned, a story floating around like a mirage of water at the end of the road, was just a jar with a nice label and nothing inside. "Our money," they'd say, "for your studies." In practice, it was vapor. So when that email came, I had already stopped hoping. I told my mother at the table, steam from the tea fogging the window facing the street. She looked at me as if I were speaking of someone else's daughter. "Full?" she asked. "Full," I said. My father checked his watch. I still don't know why. Sydney was filming a video with filters in the living room, and my mother, with that tone I'd learned to fear, said, "So the money, it's our money, Eliana. We saved it. Your sister will need it later. Or we'll see." We'll see. The elegant way to say the decision's already made. I moved to Selly Oak, near the university, into a plaster-walled place that sounded hollow when you tapped it. I studied computer engineering. I took refuge in systems, in logic that forgives no whims. I was top of my class, though no one at home ever asked how that felt. I learned something vital. Coding came naturally because it was the opposite of the life I knew. Every error had a cause. Every bug had a thread, and if you pulled it gently enough, you reached the root. At home, the root was always me, no matter which plant rotted. I worked at a consultancy on Colmore Row, overlooking those gray buildings that look like the sky swallowed them and spit them out with bite marks. Then a startup in the Jeweler Quarter. I climbed salaries like a fire escape, not daring to look down. The first month I started sending money to my parents. Not much at first, then more. It became routine, digital, mechanical. "For your father's medicine," my mother said. "The boiler's gone. The roof leaks. Your sister needs help with the course, something that could set her up." I never wanted a medal. I didn't send money out of kindness. I sent it out of order, out of defiance, to prove to myself I wouldn't become them. Birmingham healed me in its own way by walking and not talking. With my headphones on, I crossed New Street at the hour the city smells of bread and tires, the cold slipping in like a warning. I'd walk through the bullring, look at the Selfridges building with its silver circles like scales of a nameless creature. Sometimes I sat by the gas street basin, watching the water take the noise and return it in thin strips. I liked eating alone at an Indian place on Broad Street whose windows were always steamed over. The city doesn't ask. The city charges. Paid, and I was grateful. I had a couple of loves. Nothing loud. A data analyst who kissed like he was checking a spreadsheet. An architect who smelled of lemon and looked at me one night at the custard factory, as if I were an open door to a quiet courtyard. We tried for 3 months. 2 clocks keeping perfect time but with different hearts. Stubborn as ever, I kept sending money home, not because they asked but because I no longer knew how not to. Then one Friday in January, the city was nothing but ice. My mother called. Urgency hung in her voice like fingers slipping from a railing. "It's your father, baby. He's not well. We need 100,000. 110. It's surgery. There's no time. Come home." She said numbers that don't fit any logic of public health care, but fear makes strange math. My body went to war mode. I canceled meetings, sent apology emails, shut down my digital life, and drove to Small Heath with the cold seat pressing against my back. I went with a clenched heart and an open wallet. The door was open. The smell was the same as always. Dampness, old grease, Sydney's sweet perfume drifting up the staircase. My father was watching an old Aston Villa match. He came to greet me with the same smile he used when buying bread. No tubes. No medicine. No hospital. "What are you doing here, love?" he said. I looked at him and knew. There was no emergency. There was a trap. My mother came down the stairs with her hair fixed for the occasion. Sydney appeared like she was stepping out of a screen, glowing with long nails and a glitter in her eyes I didn't recognize. "Surprise," she said, and those 2 syllables tore a piece of childhood I didn't know was still inside me. "I'm getting married." She held out her hand, showing a ring that sparkled without value, like a plastic lamp. They surrounded me in the kitchen. My mother put the kettle on. Sydney pulled out a scrapbook. "We need the family's help, Ellie," my mother said, using a nickname that fits me like someone else's sweater. "Your sister, it's her big day." We've seen the venue. The botanical gardens, photos by the greenhouses, the reception at Faisley Studios in Digbeth. So lovely. But everything's gone up lately because, well, you know. Life. "You said surgery," I murmured, staring at the table with its stains of years, cigarette butts crushed in a glass dish. My fingers were cold, though the boiler hummed in the back of the house like a tired animal. "Well," my mother said, in that tone people use when changing gears without pressing the clutch. "It was just a way to get you here fast. You take so long to answer." I had to, you know. She waved her hand. A blur. Sydney turned the pages. Dresses, flowers, a 4-tier cake, a live band. It was 200 grand, but we got it down to 100. "We're doing you a favor, really. We thought of you. You're practical." She smiled with the same smile she'd shown the city when she was 12 and had already learned to get what she wanted with the lamp of her eyes. My father scratched his head. "It's just one day, love. Seeing your sister happy, that's what family's for. Family helps each other." That word. Family. A rope with thorns. They've thrown it at me so many times I don't even bleed anymore. I just see the same trick being performed again. I placed my hands on the table. Looked at them. I like looking at my hands when I decide things. They remind me of my grandmother's. Thin fingers, blue veins like river maps. I took a breath. I was cooling from the inside out, as if the air itself had turned into order. And then it all clicked at once. The college fund that became clothes for Sydney and a course she never finished, the medical bills that were dinners, the urgent calls that always matched her social calendar. The ongoing favor I'd been funding without question. I didn't raise my voice. I never do. I opened my bag, took out my phone, and connected it to the smart TV in the living room, one my mother had scored on Black Friday with my money. I projected a board of photos, screenshots of Instagram posts and saved stories, dates, locations, Sydney with a Gucci bag at the mailbox, deserved little treat nail polish, Sydney at brunch in the Ivy, a queen takes care of herself, Sydney in Ibiza in August, temporary contract on pause, new swimsuit, glass raised, Sydney at an Airbnb in the Cotswolds, fireplace lit, romantic getaway, My mother at a Lebanese restaurant on Broad Street, a ridiculously expensive bottle of wine. Celebrating life. I zoomed in on the months I'd sent the most. Boiler payment. My mother had written in one message. That same month, 3 photos of Sydney at Harrods, London, bags waving like flags. I said nothing. I let the evidence speak. Sometimes what destroys isn't the punch, it's the light. My mother stared at the screen, mouth open. Sydney's lips went stiff, but her eyes didn't drop. My father looked at me, not the photos, as if the answer were in my face, not in the facts. "Are you spying on us?" Sydney said at last. That twist, calling truth invasion. The family survival manual. When you run out of arguments, change the meaning of words. "I'm not spying," I said. "You just don't live in a cave. You post. And I pay. Paid." My mother straightened. "Don't talk to us like that. We're a family here. What we spend, we decide together. Your money, you send it because you want to. And we're grateful. But you don't owe us audits." That word came out crooked in her mouth. Audits. She doesn't know it. I do. I turned off the screen. The silence settled like fine dust. Outside, a car passed slowly. You could hear the city breathing, that low chimney breath neighborhoods have on a Friday at 6. I opened my mouth and tasted metal like a key. "I'm not paying for Sydney's wedding," I said. "I'm not paying for anything else." My mother leaned back as if I'd thrown water at her. "What are you saying, girl? You've lost your mind." Sydney slammed the scrapbook on the table. "You're rich, Ellie. You don't even feel it. 100,000 to you is what a night out is to me. You could do it without blinking, but you like watching us suffer. You've always been jealous." I laughed finally, a laugh without railing. Jealous of what, Sid? Of punishments in my name? Of the good bed that was never mine? Of a college fund that vanished as soon as I stopped believing in Santa? I'm not jealous. I'm awake. My father opened his mouth, closed it. I can read his silences the way others read palms. He would say this: "Eliana, sweetheart, try to understand. It's your sister's special day. We don't know about money, you do. Help us not make fools of ourselves. Don't make a scene." He would also say, "I don't know how we got here. I only wanted peace." I look at him and feel something close to tenderness, a tired tenderness that asks for nothing anymore. My father isn't cruel. He's a coward. And cowardice, when it's chronic, drips like a leak until the ceiling rots through. I stood up and went to my old room. The wallpaper was bubbling around the socket. In the drawer of the bedside table, a few things were still there. A bus receipt to Moore Street, a cloth wristband from the Slam Dunk Festival I never attended, because the punishment from that camp incident had stretched on for weeks. I went back to the kitchen with an envelope. Yes, they still exist. I pulled out a sheet of paper and laid it in front of my mother. It's the record of transfers. The last 3 years. 20,000, 30, 50. You and I both know there were months of 100. That day you called crying, "Elena, your father, I don't know what to do." Tell me, what did you buy the next day? That copper pan you never use? That dress you photographed yourself wearing in the mirror? My mother looked at me with eyes that weren't hers. "How dare you?" "The same way I dared to grow up in this house," I said. "Like that. Blood in my mouth, neck straight." Sydney tore the scrapbook as something in her face cracked. The same something that once pushed me down the stairs and said I'd fallen by myself. "You're a rat," she spat. "Always ruining things. You think you're better. Fine, keep your money. I'm getting married anyway. The people who love me will help." "Then call them," I said. It sounded cold. The voice came from someone who lives inside me and takes over when I can't. "Call them now. Let's see who puts up the 100,000. My mother stood up and came close. She smelled of cheap shampoo and indignation. "We gave you life. You owe us respect." That phrase. That blackmail. I remember every winter I spent with red hands doing homework at the kitchen table, while Sydney watched series under a blanket with hot chocolate she told me not to touch. I remember the Christmases when I set the table and cleared the plates while my mother said in that tone, "A woman helps," and my father nodded into his glass without looking at me. I remember the afternoon I glued my fingers fixing a broken ornament and my mother screamed, "Why do you touch what isn't yours?" I remember too much. "I owe you exactly what you gave me," I said. No lies. No theft dressed up as need. No favoritism turned into a household religion. Not anymore. There were no blows. No shouting to alert the neighbors. Just that muffled fury of British houses that know how to live with closed doors and carpets that swallow footsteps. My father sat down, lowered his eyes. I wanted to touch his shoulder. I didn't. I turned around and left, the cold pricking like clean needles. Driving back felt like washing my face in icy water. The city let me pass. I crossed the Queensway Tunnel under its yellow lights and thought about how simple the world becomes when people stop complicating it for you. Monday, I canceled the standing transfer. It's easy in the end, one click and the blood stops leaking from the old wound. I sent a short email. As of today, I won't be able to send any more money. I wish you all the best. Eliana. If I'd recorded it, it might have sounded more human than they deserved. I wrote it instead. Words remain. Tone can be guessed. Cold. Precise. The messages came that night like fine rain seeping through cracks. My mother. You left us on the street. Your father's sick. You only think of yourself. Sydney. The wedding's not canceled. You're a pathetic, jealous cow. My father. Silence. Then my mother again. How do we pay the gas? The electricity? Don't you care if we freeze? Out of habit, I checked her Instagram. Sydney had posted a story at the mailbox. Coffee and a new blazer. Self-care, she wrote. The cynicism pulled a smile out of me. That night I slept as if I'd been emptied of noise. I listened to my own breathing through the cracked window, the city's hum in the distance like a noble machine. They said I was the one who ruined the wedding. And yes, I did. Without my money, Digbeth stopped wanting them. Faisley Studios asked for a deposit. There wasn't one. The botanical gardens, all that glass and greenhouse light, don't work on credit. Sydney got furious, made calls, borrowed, and discovered the world on the other side of invisible privilege, the world that says no with a clarity that cuts. She ended up getting married at the Holiday Street Registry Office, a Tuesday at 4, in a dress that from a distance tried hard to be something else. The guests ate at a Weatherspoon on Corporation Street, the square peg. I heard about it because Birmingham is a big village and news circulates. I wasn't invited. I wouldn't have gone. Weeks later, one afternoon, I ran into my father on New Street. He was carrying a pharmacy bag. When he saw me, he smiled shy. We said hello, walked a bit, talked about the weather. That weather the English use when they don't want to talk about what matters. I told him he could go to the GP about his condition, that I could come with him if he wanted. No need, he said. His generation's favorite phrase. No need. I gave him a brief hug. He smelled of old tobacco. I wanted to tell him I was sorry for not dying of pity for them. I didn't. What came out instead was, "Take care." He looked at me with the eyes of men who've never learned to say the word sorry and nodded. When the money stopped, the rope that tied us did too. I found myself walking slower through the city. One Sunday, I went to the Gas Street Basin and watched an old man scoop leaves from the water with a small net. He did it with professional patience. It calmed me to watch someone fix their own mess. That same day, I passed through the Bullring early before the crowds. The Selfridges building gleamed like a fish being teased by the sun. And I realized that, for the first time in a long time, I wasn't performing for an invisible audience. I was walking unmeasured. I heard it through others. My mother's cousin, who works in a bakery, that Sydney and her brand new husband were in trouble. Debts. A loan for the big day that turned out not so big. A sofa bought in installments, a canceled trip to Paris, a fight over a new phone. I didn't feel joy. I felt justice, something duller, heavier. I'm no saint. There was one night when anger rose in me like a fever. I opened an old folder and found childhood photos. Me in a corner with a book. Sydney, center of a birthday party that wasn't mine. Me clearing dishes. Sydney in a new dress. I wanted to call my mother and recite a list, to name every instance. But lists don't heal. I thought of the word revenge. It has an edge. Smells of metal. Sometimes it gets confused with justice because both stop the bleeding. I lay down on the carpet, turned off every light, and breathed one long breath. When I finished, the fever was gone, leaving behind a clean fatigue. People mistake cutting ties for hatred. I don't hate. I cut because loving myself means closing doors. I threw myself into work with an odd kind of focus. At the Colmore Row office, I set up a board with 3 columns. Done in progress, never again. Under never again, I wrote, lies, manipulation, responsibility for others. Someone saw it and said, that's intense. I smiled without explaining. Sometimes the most intense thing is writing a truth where everyone expects an excuse. Time passed. Different emails arrived. A woman who once taught me at university invited me to give a talk to first-year students. I went, sat in a cold auditorium smelling of cheap coffee and nerves. I talked about engineering, but I talked about something else without naming it. I told them, the world will ask you to justify your success. Don't explain. Show results. Don't defend yourself to people who don't want to understand. I saw eyes light up, hands take notes. I felt a quiet joy, the kind you feel when a line of code runs flawlessly. Afterward, I stood by Old Joe, the clock tower, leaning against the rail. I watched people pass. Strange how, for the first time, the word family sounded like possibility instead of punishment. My mother wrote me a letter. Yes, on paper. Left it with the doorman at my building in the jeweler recorder, tight handwriting. A tea stain on the corner. I opened it in the kitchen while the kettle whistled. Daughter, it began, I don't understand what happened to us. I always wanted the best for my girls. If I made mistakes, it was out of love. The phrase of those who never face the damage head-on. Then one line that caught me. Your father asks about you. That part was true. My father asks as if to make sure I haven't slipped off the map. I didn't answer. And yet, one afternoon I passed near the house. I didn't go in. I stood across the street, looking at the curtains. A neighbor stepped out with the trash. The air smelled of frying oil and exhaustion. I didn't feel nostalgia. What I felt was something denser, like a stone that fits in your pocket and doesn't get in the way. I tossed it into the canal on my way home. There's a small restaurant on Hurst Street, near the gay village, where they make a slow stew that reminds me patience is a tool too. I sometimes sit there with a notebook and make lists, not of grudges but of achievements. Learning to eat alone without shame. Looking in the mirror and seeing a woman who chose herself. Closing the door and having the silence sound like peace, not threat. Budgeting for me, not for the house that mistook me for its accountant. Sydney once texted me in the middle of the night, furious. You're invisible in my life. You don't exist. I laughed. That's how it all started, I thought, and you have no idea what a gift you're giving me. I deleted my reply before sending it. The power of not answering is an art I'm perfecting. Every so often, I walk through Digbeth just to walk. The walls bloom with new murals, colors appearing as if the city dreamed itself anew each month. I pass by Faisley Studios and, of course, there are weddings. Happy people, flowers, drunk ants. They don't move me. That's fine. Let them celebrate. I celebrate other things. I sit on a bench and watch the yellow light of a summer afternoon fall, and I understand that forgiveness isn't a ceremony of grand words. It's a quiet craft, like pulling leaves from a canal with a small net. Day after day, without applause. More than one person has told me what I did was cruel. Maybe it was the soft cruelty of precision. I set boundaries with a scalpel, not a hammer. I don't apologize. I learned the world through exactitudes. If my mother said emergency and I came, then emergency meant money. I changed the definition. Now emergency means when my peace is at risk. And I react just as fast. I arrive, I close, I save what's left of me. One drizzly day, the kind of Birmingham rain that doesn't fall so much as press sideways, my father called from a number I didn't know. "I'm at the doctor's," he said. "All fine. I'm telling you because I didn't want you hearing it from your aunt." I sat down under a doorway on Temple Row, felt a knot in my throat, small, harmless. "Thanks for telling me," I said. "You don't need anything from me for this." "No," he said. "Just wanted you to know." That's love too small, clumsy enough. I hung up and watched the shrubs glisten, oily under the rain. One night I dreamed I was sitting with Sydney on the edge of a canal dock, our legs hanging, her crying because the water was cold. In the dream I didn't hug her. I didn't leave either. I just stayed, let her cry. That image stayed with me all morning. Maybe it's a sign of something. Not everything in life is a script. Sometimes it's just a scene the brain keeps just in case. The story of the college fund is simple. The moment I stopped believing in it, I found my own way to pay for life. When they tried one last time to bait me with an expensive lie, I decided my money doesn't buy love or peace or silence. It buys time. And I chose to spend it on myself. Right now, as I tell you this, my window's slightly open. It smells of rain just gone on old brick. In the kitchen, the clock makes that gentle sound clocks make when they finally understand they're not in charge. There's a plate with the remains of curry I'll order again tomorrow because I like the burn. On the table lies an envelope with a document I almost signed and then put away. A mortgage for a bigger flat in Harborne. I don't need it yet. I decide slowly. I've come to like a room where everything has its place. Birmingham is the same. Birmingham is different. The bullring fills up. Selfridges laughs in its skin of silver discs. The canals carry leaves, cigarette ends, secrets. Sometimes I walk down Broad Street late and watch girls in heels held up by friends who truly love them. That does move me. Once one of them tripped and I caught her arm on instinct. "Thanks, love," she said. "No problem," I said, and walked away with that small residual warmth that comes from doing something without wanting anything back. The last time I saw my mother was at the Bullring Market. She was buying vegetables. I was in a hurry. She saw me, made the gesture to come closer. I stopped. We stayed 2 steps apart. Downhill. The look between a mother and daughter who fought until there are no new words left. "Are you well?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "You?" "Could be better," she said. That could was an invitation to the past. I let it pass. "Take care," I said. "You too," she answered. No hug, just manners. Enough for that day. I don't know if one day we'll talk all this through. I know I'll never again pay in exchange for affection. I know my sister lives with her mirror, that the house that built her still follows wherever she goes. Mine follows me too. The difference is I've learned to open the windows. I don't pretend to be a heroine. I was a coward for a long time. I was the accountant of a family that treated me as an open account. I was efficient in the art of yielding. I became something else the day they said surgery, and I drove back and found my father watching a match as if nothing had happened. That day, something in me completed a cycle. There's one scene I keep. An autumn afternoon for a clock light, the low gold that makes everything look truer. I was walking along the canal by the mailbox. The water held dead leaves and glints of light. A boy threw a stone. The ripples spread in perfect, concentric circles, disciplined and calm. I thought every decision is a stone. I threw mine, watched the circles widen, never looked back. And here I am. I don't know if I forgave her or just stopped needing her forgiveness. I only know I finally sleep on the side I choose. And my bed, when it creaks, it sounds like a house that's finally run out of ghosts.